I would like to thank the panel for joining us to our discussion today. And of course, I want to thank everybody in the audience. So we have not a lot of time, so I'll start quickly. And I will start with our Honorable Professor Pedro Sebastiao Teta with the first question. So in your respective countries, what are the challenges that you are faced that are infrastructure related, to education? And what are the first steps to implement and grow, especially remote areas with education, and how you can educate more of the people of your country?
Thank you. Good morning. Let's say bom dia in Portuguese. Thank you for inviting me. I want to thank the government of Botswana for organizing this meeting, also all companies sponsoring this meeting. Let me give you a small information. Maybe some of you don't know more about Angola. Angola is a, let's say, it's a young country. We get our independence in 1975. More than 95% of population was illiterate. And after that, we spent more than 30 years on the war. And just 11 years from now, we get the peace, let's say, and we try to reconstruct the country. When we get our independence, infrastructure, telecom infrastructure were very, let's say, just on the coast of the country. But relating to this question, I will tell you a little bit about Angola. After 2002, we launched a very big program to install the fiber optic in all the country. When we talk about country, Angola is a little bit more than South Africa. You can imagine how big is Angola with 18 million population. And it's not easy to cover all the country. We have two strategies. One, to launch fiber optic in all towns, all cities, all provinces, and at the same time, we have a big project to launch our own satellite to cover all the villages, all municipalities where the fiber can achieve. Regarding the education, the problem we face most of the time is the last mile. Last mile is a big challenge. Okay, we have last mile to the houses and last mile to the schools. And when we arrive in schools, another thing we face, we don't have infrastructure in the school themselves. We don't have any network. Sometimes we have to use Wi-Fi without wire because infrastructure is not there. Most of our country, when we build schools, we don't think about ICT. The problem now in Angola, from 2002 to now, we built more than 36,000 new schools. And it's not easy to cover the school with infrastructure. Of course, I see Huawei is here, he shared it, Mr. Chair, thank you for sharing the meeting. Okay, we work also with Huawei and with many other companies, but the big problem is the human capital. Okay, it's not just to bring technology, it's not just to install fiber optic, we need also to maintain also this infrastructure. These are the challenge just to start. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, and I want to add also to what you said that this infrastructure has to be reliable, because if it's not reliable and it doesn't offer you high availability, then it demotivates the kids, the students, for using the technology and learning. It's better to go play football than being frustrated with technology that doesn't connect, or they could be in the middle of a test or in the middle of a very important class and the connection goes down. So it's very, very important for maintaining the infrastructure. So I would like to discuss a little bit. And this is for Mr. Solomon Mhlanga and from Zimbabwe. And I would like to say, is building a national broadband network solely a government responsibility, or do you think the countries should have also a strategy and thoughts for privatizing or allowing private companies to operate, to fast-track this ICT for education?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to add my gratitude to the government of Botswana for hosting this event, which has allowed us to come together and be able to share developments in our various countries in the area of ICTs. From Zimbabwe, very popular country, I would say. Everybody knows about Zimbabwe. Of late, in the past decade or so, we have had our own fair share of economic and political challenges, which we are saying, as a country, we are happy that we are moving forward in a very, very positive way. That is why you don't find Zimbabwe in the headlines these days. So, on the issue of broadband connectivity, it is, we are a developing country, if I speak for Zimbabwe, and there is no way that government can be able to handle all development issues on its own, especially on the areas of ICT where there is complex knowledge requirements, I would say, which would make it very difficult for government to monopolize that space. And very much so for Zimbabwe, it has opened up that space in terms of availing broadband connectivity throughout the country. We have 3 private sector players in that space, as well as government, and because of that, we have been able to provide broadband to all major cities of the country. But now, when we go to the education sector, again, as a developing country, you would find that we still have a large part of our population in the rural areas, 70% plus or minus there. This is where the bulk of the schools are, sparsely populated, rough terrain, and that makes it a challenge to get to these schools in terms of connectivity. But basically, I can say government has definitely embraced the need for the private sector to come in and participate in that space.
Thank you very much. Actually, I believe this is an important question, and I would like to repeat and ask also other panelists for their opinions. So, what about Mr. John Mngado? Your opinion about how do you think the private sector could help in bringing the connectivity faster and with a better, cost?
Thank you, Chair. And I would also like to register my appreciation to the host government for welcoming us and also for the organizers. As far as the infrastructure of ICT is concerned, I believe that it is, I can say first of all, it should not only be the domain of the government, but it may be an advantage for governments to take the lead of putting the major infrastructure. For instance, in Tanzania, we currently have more than 7,500 kilometers of this ICT backbone, and it goes to nearly almost all the regions and districts. But the challenge here is the connectivities, as the Honorable from Angola has mentioned. So all of us sitting here, it appears that we almost have some similar challenges that are happening as far as development of ICT is concerned, education. And what we have done, we believe that this is not only the sole mandate of the government, but the government can and should allow participation of the private sector. And we are working together with the consortium of operators in making sure that we deliver the ICT requirements to the population, which more than 80% of this population is in the rural based. And I believe because the putting down of infrastructure is a very, very expensive venture, and so governments cannot go it alone. It needs participation of the private sector. And by so doing, we would also like to state that the private sector can be very, very useful, particularly as regards to the last mile connectivity, while we as a government have invested a lot in laying down the basic infrastructure. So I believe that this is it's not just for one institution, but it's a partnership.
I'm very happy to hear the great thoughts, and I think this is the right direction personally from looking how e-education has been implemented in United States in rural areas also. They also privatize, they use the private network. I'd like to turn a little bit, it's a similar question, which is important, I think, because I like to get the thoughts. But, you know, financial constraints, the initial cost of education is sometimes hinders on an implementation. Actually, I was talking with other people in this conference, and they were saying, you know, that somewhere they ran out of money, so other you know, provinces, they have implemented the e-education and others have not because of the money issue. So we all know that money is very important. So Mr. Bekithemba Gama from Swaziland, do you think that the existing infrastructure in your country, in terms of, you know, there's a telecom network, for example, or perhaps a banking network that can be used or shared, and especially when you do education, maybe you can switch a little bit the hours and do them in the evening where the banks don't work and they don't use this data. So maybe you can use that infrastructure, the existing infrastructure, for, you know, sharing with these banks, for example, and could be a private bank or could be a national bank, all right, and provide education solution. Could you share your thoughts, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. May I appreciate the government of the Republic of Botswana and our sponsors for giving us the opportunity to be here. That is true that we do have infrastructure that is in place already, but these, most of the time, are privately owned, and we know privately owned entities tend to have, the owners want some return on investment. So it would be a good idea if government were to take the lead so they ensure that they subsidize this. Right. I think it's a brilliant idea. We have, for instance, the electricity company, which has its own communication infrastructure. And we also have the broadcasting, which already has the communication infrastructure reaching some of the remote areas. You know, to ride on them would really cut costs, but then it would call for the government to put in some money. And I think it's well known that my country, Swaziland, is just from the ashes of economic disaster. In 2010, 2011, we are just recovering now. And we're actually a country in transition in two ways. One, we are about to have a new government, which means maybe some decisions cannot be taken for now until maybe next week or so. We're also a country in transition in that we did not have an independent regulator of the ICT sector and broadcasting. That was held by an operator. So there was the monopolistic tendency that was there, and things were very expensive. So we are hoping that the 2-month-old regulator now will be in a position to look at all those possibilities, to see how we can leverage on the existing infrastructure and ensure that the costs to leverage on them are not so high.
Very good. Thank you very much. Actually, I would like to hear very quick thoughts from Mr. Mabua, especially being in the CEO of BoFiNeT. I would like to hear his thoughts on that subject and understand also how the other side thinks about this.
Thank you, Chair, and I would also like to start by appreciating our government for having hosted such a successful event. Also appreciate the participants and the sponsors. But I think in terms of my thought, I feel really in terms of realizing broadband connectivity to schools, to all the different sectors across the economy, I think what is very, very key is starting at the top with defining the policy and strategies. And normally governments are very good in leading in this, those exercises. But I must emphasize the fact that normally governments would do the policies and just stop at the policy level. My experience is, especially with the private sector, there has to be clarity in terms of the strategy and the initiatives that are within the strategy. And an issue of infrastructure sharing, so that we minimize parallel infrastructure, I think is very, very key. If I were to talk about our experience in Botswana, we have developed, our regulator has developed guidelines for infrastructure sharing. But I think they don't go all the way in terms of enabling broadband connectivity. I think what is very, very key is, in this case, this forum is about education. We kind of half-hearted most of the nations, especially African countries. I think we don't pay much attention into doing e-education strategies. And at the same time, if you were to make an assessment in our environment, there are lots of expenditures annually. And if we were to come up with e-education strategies, that would help, and because it's some kind of an agreement of what we do as a nation, I think we will be able to achieve a lot. But on the question of whether there is lack of funding, I differ a bit, Mr. Chair, because you make a survey and assessment, you realize that most of the African countries have a universal services fund. And most of those funds, we don't have a clue in terms of how to utilize those funds. I think within the Universal Services Fund and the e-education strategy, if we were to have an agreement through those strategies on how e-education should be benefiting from those funds, I think it would be an excellent way looking into the future and plowing the seeds into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can find creative ways to share, as Mr. Bekithemba Gama said, you know, find even the broadcast companies, they have bandwidth available. Maybe they don't use as much in the mornings when schools are in session also. Maybe we can share that bandwidth. And I think we can go far if we make this as policymakers, you know, trying to find this kind of creative ways to do this. So for our next question, Honorable Professor Pedro Sebastiao. So, you know, broadband is expensive in general, especially in sub-Saharan areas around the world. I would say it's very expensive. So the cost sometimes is not the cost of the installationist, but it's policy, because you have these monopolistic behaviors that sometimes bring the cost higher. And, you know, and I know you're a policymaker and a minister, of course, and maybe you can share some very good insights for how do you think you can put pressure a little bit and bring that cost down. That is not necessarily a cost of the equipment sometimes, but it's cost that comes from a monopoly.
Sorry. It's very good questions. In Africa, we face 3 gaps. One is the gap of access, another one is the gap of use, and another one is the gap of ownership. This is a gap relating to digital divide. And when we talk about broadband, just I want to point out very important things. You can have broadband, but we need content. And sometimes our focus is just on broadband without content. Regarding the monopoly, of course, our experience in Angola, we have 5 operators. I see competition is one of the key issues to lower down the cost of telecommunication and broadband. But also when we talk about broadband, we have, I consider 4 levels. First, the cost of international connections, okay? Submarine sea cable or VSAT, some prices coming there from with this infrastructure. We have the broadband, the fiber optic, we launch many kilometers sometime, but sometimes we don't know how to maintain this fiber optic. Also, this can increase the cost. And another thing can increase the cost is power. Power. Most of our areas, rural area, we don't have power. And this can increase also the costs of all the operators. For example, in Angola is one of the things for increasing the cost. Yes. But I fully agree with you that if you have many players, many companies playing on the market, and if you have the power and the human capital in the place, I think cost can be shut down.
I like your thinking. Thank you. It's very good thinking. And while you were talking, I got some other ideas in my mind. So you stimulate a little bit some of the, for example, having a contract with a satellite company. If you, for example, share that bandwidth with other countries and do a Pan-African kind of, a consortium, if you want to call it, that goes in and deals with that company. And then you share, because sometimes universities could also share the content, and you said that very well earlier. So what happens if you get that content with a satellite that goes, and the satellite can project into the entire continent, maybe you can share that cost there also, because you said international bandwidth is also very expensive. So perhaps I want to put that in your minds. It's not a question, it's just a comment for me that I believe the power of many going there in front of these companies and trying to get a better price and then share it is another way of doing something like that. So I would like to talk on my next question. I would like to talk a little bit about how do you plan for, to deploy or roll out your e-education solution. In my mind, and I'm going to explain that, there are kind of 2 ways to do e-education. One, I call it real time, where you have a classroom and a professor or a teacher somewhere in a location and broadcasts and communicates with many schools. And that is a good way to do education because then you save the travel. But it demands a lot of bandwidth because it's real time. And it gives the opportunity with the kids and the students to react and interact in real time. The other way is the offline, where you go with companies like Pearson and you get video content and then you distribute to the schools and you can do this kind of education that requires less bandwidth but has drawbacks in terms of no interaction, no real-time interaction with the teachers or anything. So, Mr. Solomon Mhlanga from Zimbabwe, which way you think that you are going to roll out in your country? Which model is going to be in your mind, in your strategy for rolling out e-education in your country?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In Zimbabwe, this year we have a government in partnership with the Universal Services Fund being managed by the regulator. We have launched what we are calling the Connect a School, Connect a Community program. We are running it as a pilot program where we are targeting schools in the rural areas, the extreme rural areas where it is difficult to get to, even by road. It is a program which has started this year. We are targeting 60 schools in all districts of the country. We are looking at about, in the provinces, we are looking at about 10 schools per province, where we are bringing in the gadgets to the particular school together with preloaded content onto the hardware. The program entails capacity building for the teachers that are supposed to deliver this. And we are looking at this as the model to use before we can move on to live connectivity. And so far I can say we are pretty pleased with the progress that has gone so far, working with the private sector. This is not just government doing this on its own. As I have already explained, that for government on its own to roll out ICT programs will be difficult. We are working with the private sector, and so far the indications, they are very good, and we are targeting the rural areas. When you go into the urban areas, you would find that these are more, they are more affluent schools which have already jumped onto the bandwagon, and they already have connectivity at their schools. And to a large extent, you will find that they are using content which is widely available, but at the same time, as government, we are saying there is great need for us to ensure that the content that will be used by these schools is in line with the government syllabus, right. To make sure that we at least are very focused on what the country requires.
I would like to ask the same or similar question to our Honorable Professor Pedro Sebastiao Teta also, because I like his insights, and especially being the Secretary of State Communications and Information Technology. This is something that we need to balance, the demand of bandwidth, also the content, and then regulating also the content, because sometimes real-time content, which is, live, is sometimes you cannot regulate. So your thoughts, sir?
Thank you again for giving me the floor. I think we have to use both solutions, online and offline. Depends on the context, depends on the bandwidth available. Okay, we have to combine. Some areas, I think offline solution can be a very good solution. And the suggestion you did, we can get some bandwidth from banking company during the night, for example, to do a backup of this content, and after that to deliver that. Right. Can be one of the way. Okay, but also I think for education we need to find special cost. We have to deal with operators, okay, because they have some social responsibilities, and on the social responsibilities, I think the bandwidth for school must have a special cost. Maybe, okay, is a challenge I give all for Huawei and all of you. Okay, we have to find a way to negotiate, okay, to lower this price for school maybe 30% of the real cost. This is one of the way I think we can do that. But when we're talking about ICT for education and contents, we have also to empower local peoples. We have to empower local companies. When I talk local company, I'm talking about national companies to do contents, endogenous contents, not just to import content from abroad, okay? Because we have to install it, we have to empower, okay? And we have also to innovate our societies, right. Okay? Our societies must innovate according to our needs. This is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. A little bit related question, and this is for Mr. John Mngodo from Tanzania, and especially since he's the Permanent Secretary of Communication Science and Technology, which means a little bit more content now. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Will you rely on universities and schools? How you're going to get that content and how you're going to plan to deliver it? And you know, and how that content, you know, that content has to be incentive and nice, so you can attract the students to enroll into this program. So you're thinking in terms of, are you going to supply? Are you going to make these relations with your university? You're going to mandate your university to provide curriculums tailored for e-education, so you can do that, or how you plan to do this?
Well, thank you. I think where we should start, we start at the government level. This is at the policy level, and that's where the brain behind ICT development and in education should be. However, as alluded earlier, that government has a lot of stakeholders, including those think tanks like the universities and other schools. So curriculum development is mainly in the domain of the government. And as the Honorable Minister has said earlier on, that the government has to make sure that the content is relevant and will produce the desired results for the development of the ICT and the country in the various fields of economy and social development in the country. So it should be guided by the government, but it should comprise of all the stakeholders that they can have an input. Not only the universities and even the private individuals or institutions, operators, they can have an input so that to improve the content should be relevant, and even how it shall be delivered to the targeted institutions, particularly the schools, in universities, the primary schools and secondary schools. Yeah.
Thank you. Very good insights, Mr. Mngodo. So for Mr. Bekithemba Gama from Swaziland, you know, we saw that in e-education, you know, we saw there's many technologies, common infrastructure, data centers involved. I mean, you're going to store your content and deliver it in places. In every country, that's how it works, at least I've seen the architecture and the rollouts of these networks. But as I was talking with the Uganda ministers and the fellows there, their thoughts were a little bit ahead, saying, okay, how in a rural area we're going to maintain all this equipment? Are we going to have experts there? How we're going to be doing upgrades, equipment, you know, in a few years, maybe we get to do a new operating system or maybe a security update, as we usually do. What are your thoughts of doing that in your country?
Thank you, Chair. We, in Swaziland, we have what we call a National Information Communication Infrastructure Policy, a National ICT Policy, which spells out the desires of government on how this should be carried out. And it includes, among others, the training, retraining of teachers that are on the ground. And we're looking at a situation where in the near future, where instead of maybe having the computers in all the classrooms, but having what we call maybe a telecenter for the community as well. And then the teachers in the school would be the managers of those telecenters. They will have been retrained by experts in the field to ensure that they maintain that. But when it comes then to whether we want the content to be interactive or not, it would depend on the availability of finance. Of course, we would like to have interactive as well as non-interactive, because it depends on what you are going to be learning. For instance, now we are in the process of rolling out the digital migration process. There is a plan to leverage on that when it comes to education. We leverage on that and for real-time education as well as recorded education. So because these processes are moving together, and we have an obligation as a country to ensure that we migrate. So we will leverage on that to ensure that some form of electronic education is done. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Actually, insightful. I would like to hear how the BoFiNeT, and from the chairman here, how they do it. How do you do? You know, obviously you maintain a network in many rural areas. How do you maintain it? How you support it? What is, how do you do it? Maybe you can give us some insights.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably let me not start talking about BoFiNeT, but let me talk about the intention of the government in terms of how to roll out e-education. I think just for information, e-education is one of the pillars, 7 pillars in our national ICT policy. But the intention in there is that we should have a dedicated infrastructure for education. And that infrastructure, as a transitional process, the way the whole infrastructure has been delivered is such that for the secondary schools, we started with secondary schools. We have labs with 20 computers in each one of those, and with some limited connectivity to those labs. But into the future, the intention is that all the schools, primary schools, colleges, secondary schools, universities, would have a dedicated, would be riding on that dedicated education infrastructure. But as defined in the pillar, there has to be an element of content development and an element of capacity building. But in terms of how it should be done, for our economy, our population, the way we see it is we will have a national infrastructure, but of course with some few data centers that are dedicated, and as much as possible, centralized operations and maintenance, and some kind of low-level support in the region. But let me talk about the government structures again. The government, in terms of maintenance of infrastructure, the computers, especially the IT infrastructure, we have divided it into 6 regions, and given this to the private sector. There is maintenance teams within the government, and then in addition to that, complementing that, private sector has been given the 6 regions, and for each region you have a company that is focusing on maintenance of the infrastructure, including the PCs and the capacities that are delivered. I think that's the best approach, especially in terms of a partnership between the government and the private sector. But that has to be guided by a master plan and strategy like I did indicate. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good insights. So it's just I want to tell you a little bit my insights a little bit for this. Private sector has done that, like banks, they need to maintain, obviously. And what we have done, and this is not to say Huawei because other companies do the same thing, but we try remotely to do upgrades, to maintain. There's a lot of diagnostics you can run and then get the data and understand what is happening in that equipment and then be able to get parts or provide software remotely again to upgrade it and do things. So these are the things that we need to be looking, because I'm not sure, you know, that we can get into that level with a teacher. Maybe the teacher can do the application, the installation, but not the hardware, not these kind of things, right? So we got to be, again, innovative and creative to do it remotely. So you obviously understand that content has to be stored, and data centers are important, and then the broadband to support these data centers. What are your thoughts, you know, and having data centers and then put these data centers into the network, that is, you create a cloud, which is, you know, the next evolution in general, how the internet is evolving and is going to be working. Where are you in terms of, you know, in your countries, in terms of, you know, cloud technologies, this kind of infrastructure, which also could be shared for education purposes? And I don't want to put you on the spot again, Honorable Professor Pedro, Sebastiao, Teta, but your insights are very valuable, and I appreciate your thoughts first.
Thank you. The cloud computing is a very good solution now, but is related to the broadband. The bandwidth, the broadband can depends if we have the availability of bandwidth and the broadband. Regarding Angola, we build ourselves 2 data centers. We start first to build data center for government, because ourselves, the government, we have a lot of small islands. We don't have interconnectivity between and interoperability between our data. The same challenge we'll face with schools. We need to create the same interoperability and the same challenges. If to do these interoperabilities, we need data center, and we have to use a cloud solution. Okay, but exactly how my colleagues said, we have to innovate. We have to identify our needs. We have also common problems and differences in our countries. Okay. But I'm fully agree that we have to use all these new technologies coming now, like cloud computing. Okay. Right. In Angola, we start. Okay, we still have a long way to run, but of course we'll try to do that.
Thank you. What about you, Mr. Solomon Mhlanga, in Zimbabwe?
Yes. I can talk about the issue of the central data center for the public sector. Government, as we are talking right now, is upgrading the small data center which was there to a much bigger one, bigger capacities, to come with the appropriate cloud computing technologies there. That is the way to go. And this is what government is currently building and putting in place. Of course, again, working with the private sector, some of the companies are exhibiting at this particular fora. It is the way to go. That's the future, and in terms of it might be expensive when you build that data center, but in terms of savings that will arise when the data center is in place in terms of manpower to manage these technologies, it will be much easier. And you can definitely acquire the efficiencies that come with cloud computing, and as well as making sure that the manpower is available, avoiding dissipated manpower across regions, which will be difficult to find. So definitely for Zimbabwe, that is the way to go, and we are on that road.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to change a little bit the subject and ask Mr. Bekithemba Gama, you know, the policy for one laptop per child, or maybe a tablet with the applications on that go on. How do your policymakers in your country determine how you provision this equipment to the students, and also how, you know, people like to share, scan, or also print material? How do you do that in your country?
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Currently, well, maybe let me start by saying that one laptop per child would be a brilliant idea. That would be the ideal situation that we want to find ourselves in. But what we have now is the computer labs approach, where the labs, and what we have currently actually is around 30 computers on average per school in secondary schools. We do have some schools that have that got an opportunity to get the laptop for every child. I think we have 1 or 2 schools, but we're not sure how they are managing it. But we are looking that maybe in the far future we'll have that. I think what we should bear in mind about the people who are supposed to make decisions on those things is that they are what I can call the BBTs, those who were born before technology. So you need to take your time to try and explain the need for this, and yet they are supposed to take that decision. So you don't want to come up with big costs and say, now we know every child must have a laptop. Although we know that's the ideal, but you need to take it bit by bit. So for now, for us, what is working is the computer labs. We're hoping to increase the number of computers in each school, but we take it one step at a time for the reasons that I've mentioned, that you don't want to be scaring the decision makers in spending on something that they are not sure if really it's the way to go. Thank you.
Mr. Mngodo, your thoughts about one laptop per child and how you roll it out?
Well, I'm not sure that I can agree totally with it, even though, as my colleague from Zimbabwe has mentioned, it's an ideal situation that everybody would love to have it. However, given the coverage of our countries, the resources that are available, that one is quite a tall order to implement. So, and we would like to have a system that has a long-lasting impact, and then that is sustainable. So I'm not quite sure that that's a program of one laptop per child. We've got about almost 15 million children that we can provide. So I can imagine providing for 15 million children. And what if after they finish, how do you maintain those issues? There are many questions that you have to ask about that program. For me, I would think that we would approach this in terms of establishing labs. Labs would be an ideal, because in that environment we would have shared resources, and we would also be able to keep track with the content of what's going on to the students. So I think I would submit to that one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I want to say a couple of things in terms of, you know, in the beginning, Apple wanted to give this iPads and all this. Everybody had an iPad. Was saying, wow, I have a device that's Apple, and everybody wanted to get that. Maybe that's an incentive for, you know, very good students to say, if you do well, maybe we'll give you an iPad or something. And that will put a lot of people into becoming better students, to an incentive in general to get to be educated as much and be good. So that might be something.
I think this is also a good thing. It can create some incentives. Recently, I was reading some article somewhere, and in certain country, I don't want to mention, one of the developed countries, they provided the secondary schools children with iPads. And it was a massive program. Only 2 weeks into the program, they had to recall all of these gadgets. Why? Because the student found out ways of going out of what they were restricted. So I think that's a good thing, but we need to watch it very carefully.
Be able to do that. Actually, you bring in one of the questions here, and I have many questions. I don't know if we're going to have the time to go over all of this, but since you brought that up, you know, there's bring your own device is another technology that especially companies use in terms of applying policies for their own employees. Right? I mean, if you have a company and they have, you know, materials that are proprietary for a company, you want to control, you know, what these people send out, right? You don't want to send your private and secrets to everybody. You want to control. At the same time, you want to control your employees, what sites and how they use this. So your thoughts about, since you brought it up, your thoughts about bring your own device policies that you can apply, which is, you know, part of the infrastructure, is something that, have you thought of implementing something like that in your networks? And since you are on the spot here, so Mr. John, could you tell us?
Well, that's pretty new. We haven't thought yet about, but I think it's food for thought. We need to think about whether allowing people coming with their gadgets. I know there are different policies at different institutions concerning what you can bring in and what you can take out, because that carries a lot of risk for the security of information that is in. So we need to devise specific policies of how we can go about doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Bekithemba Gama, any thoughts about, or have you heard about bring your own device?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I will share the sentiment with my colleagues who've just spoken that, you know, the policies should be in place on how then do you control the use of this personal gadget.
Right.
Because some of them are a bit more powerful. You bring them in a school setting, they'll be able to exchange information which they're not supposed to exchange.
Right.
So you need to put some strict policy. I think that's an extreme end of the road that we want to take. But
right.
Maybe when we, like I've said, when we're all in the same level of thinking when it comes to ICTs. But as it is, it comes with some security concerns. Thank you.
So one other, and I think that will be the last question, and it's, maybe I'll combine a couple here so we can get a little bit more. But one of the thoughts that we have is, when you put everything on the internet and it's publicly available, then you need to start thinking about security. Denial of service, other countries, hackers. As you understand, there's a lot of things that go on the internet that are not always appropriate. Your thoughts, first of all, I'll go to Mr. Mabua, because he's with, again, BoFiNeT, and they have a little bit more experience and probably with security. Your thoughts, sir?
Thank you, sir. I think what is very key, and most of us as African countries, we haven't been paying attention to establish security structures. You know, the computer emergency response teams and the infrastructure that is necessary for that. But like I did indicate, I think it's important that we also separate the education infrastructure and the content hosting from the other essential and very sensitive services, information, such as, example, identity card databases,
right.
the passport databases. I think that separation is very, very key, because our experience here is such that for the education content, you want that information to be accessible using those school labs. You want it accessible through the libraries, because in Botswana we have free internet in some of our libraries. And normally there is limited restrictions in terms of what you should be accessing. So I think in a nutshell, the issue of having security structures in terms of the infrastructure, the expertise, the legislation, that would teams that would be able to pick and proactively pick any intrusions. I think that's very, very key. Thank you.
Thank you by the way, very, very good thoughts here. So I would like to close this wonderful panel discussion by thanking all of you for your thoughtful insights. As you know, Huawei is committed to help this region, and Huawei has been here since, about 15 years ago. We came here, and we are committed to help all the sub-Saharan area and this region. And I will close with a very short video to show you that we are, what we do a little bit in education. And again, thank you, and thank Mr. John Gassi for organizing this panel. Thank you.
With the development of the internet and multimedia technologies, education industry break through the traditional education model, implement teaching electronization, automation, networked and multimedia. Cloud Services Platform implements automatic resources distribution and mutual backup between each school.
Good afternoon, class. Welcome to
Standardization of multimedia teaching equipment enable teachers and students in different areas to interact for high-definition audio and video in real time. Internet community supports text communicating and note sharing between classmates and friends. Support good friends follow. Update, reminding, and popular recommend, etc. Easy to use, just like Facebook. Multimedia classroom, PC, mobile terminals, and other learning methods meet the learning needs of different environments. Huawei eSpace Education Solution meets cloud services, mobile, internet, and cooperation. Industry needs and development trend creates a modern environment for schools, improves student skills, so that students from different areas will receive the same education to improve learning quality and promote education fair.